Welcome back, my name is Brandon, and today we're going to be changing out the rear lower ball joints on our 1989 Nissan 240SX. If you haven't already looked into changing your rear ball joints on your S13, you're going to find that there's not a lot of options out there. No part stores make any direct replacements for them, but there is a direct replacement in the form of a ball joint, a front lower ball joint from a B12 Sentra, so I think it's anywhere from 1985 to 1989. Any front lower control arm ball joint will fit directly onto the rear lower control arm of an S13. They're honestly pretty cheap. This Moog part was about $15 on Amazon. You gotta get two of them though. It should come with the dust boot, cotter pin, and a nut, as well as the ball joint itself. The next piece that you're gonna need is a ball joint press. It's kind of expensive to rent from AutoZone. Cost me about $140, but it's a pretty comprehensive kit, and I'll get all my money back as soon as I return this to the store. There's probably cheaper renting options out there, but I'm not totally worried about it because I'm gonna get all my money back as soon as I return the toolkit after this job. I've opted to replace the ball joints with the control arm and the rear knuckle off the car, as I plan to tackle some other projects during this job. Feel free to leave the control arm on the car, but you might appreciate taking it off if you have other suspension related projects you'd like to tackle at the same time. This boot is leaky and torn, which is a good indicator that the ball joint needs replacing. Before I can get to the 22mm nut, the stubborn pesky cotter pin needs to go. Thanks to some gentle counseling and persuasion, it's gone. An impact is going to make this job tremendously easier. Instead of bloody knuckles and a few swears, all it takes is a few chugga-chuggas. This borrowed impact from my good friend Denton has saved me so much pain. I really need to invest in one. The ball joint will likely need to be hammered off the knuckle, so after loosening the nut, thread it back on enough so that it protects the threads, then hammer away. It's not a totally necessary step, but it's good practice that will keep you out of trouble in most scenarios like removing an axle. This sad, poor looking ball joint deserves some permanent retirement. Now comes time to remove the snap ring. Snap ring pliers were quite handy here, but if you only have needle nose pliers, those should do the trick just fine. If the C-clip seems stuck, blast her up with some trusty PB Blaster. Remove the under tray on the control arm using a Phillips head screwdriver. You likely won't need to retain this after installing your new ball joint, and you'll see why here in a bit. Next comes the jigsaw puzzle of assembling the ball joint press in the proper orientation. Even with the ball joint press manual handy, it took me a few tries before I finally found the right combination. Lucky for you, I've got it all laid out for you to copy. It was taking me forever to find a correct orientation of the sockets and spacers so that I could press the lower ball joint out of the car, but I think I finally found it after about half an hour playing around. So the ball joint has been literally pressed out. What we have here is a cup here, which mounts to the bottom of the ball joint press. We also have a tiny spacer in here, a cap, and a closed cup up here. I'll take this all apart so that you can see exactly which pieces are lined up, but I just wanted to show you the orientation of how this ball joint was able to get pressed out, which was downward. Now since my OEM control arms are quite old and dirty, I'm going to go ahead and paint them since I don't quite plan on upgrading to any expensive adjustable lower control arms for the rear in the near future. Also, I highly recommend going ahead and installing any polyurethane bushings that you might have on hand. While you're at this step, it's just loads easier while you have everything apart. Before I get to painting these old corroded arms, I'm going to clean them down with a wire wheel to ensure the surface is somewhat uniform for some top-notch rattle can paint. It's been a couple days now, which means our control arms are now dry enough to be handled after getting painted, so now we get to press our fresh new ball joints into our now acceptable looking control arm. Alright, so now that we have our old ball joints out, we can put this new one in. So to get this ball joints in, we're going to use a couple different tools than we used to get it out. One of them being this closed-ended cap, which is going to be bigger than the lip around the bottom of the control arm so that everything's able to be seated. I don't want to use just the butt end of our ball joint press because on the bottom there's some threading in there for a grease fitting so that we can grease up our ball joints, and I don't want to risk damaging that. That's why we're going to use this closed-ended cap, which is bigger than the ball joint itself. The next piece we're going to use on top is going to be this open-ended cap, which will allow the ball joint to be pressed in from top and it'll allow the threads to come up top and protrude through the hole, which is also provided in our ball joint press. And as an added extra step, I've gone ahead and put some grease around the ball joints and the inner part of the control arm where it's going to be sitting. I'm not sure it's a totally necessary step, but I've done it nonetheless. Alright, so here we can see that the ball joint has pressed itself all the way to the bottom part of the lower control arm. If everything's gone according to plan, we should be able to see that groove towards the bottom of the ball joints for our snap ring. And we should also see that there shouldn't be any space between the control arm and the ball joint itself. This should be fully seated in the lower control arm. The next piece we have is our ball joints boot, which is going to protect all of our grease from getting dirty. We have a little label here that says to mount it inboard, which is designated by this notch up top. So we're going to mount it this way, away from the wheel. Nice thing about these B12 Sentra ball joints is that they come with the grease fitting, but we have to screw it in the bottom. I think we'll be able to use a 10 mil wrench. Yep. Just screw it in straight. It's a tapered thread, so it'll stop whenever you feel it's good. Get maybe one more turn in there. No, maybe not. I'm gonna face it. Yeah, one more turn. Face it inboard like so. That should be good. Now we can grease our ball joint. Now that the boot and fitting are on our fresh new ball joint, it's time to reassemble the knuckle. Once in place, the ball joint nut will get torqued down to 50 foot-pounds. As you can see, our new nut uses a 21 mil socket, unlike the old one which used a 22 mil socket. After you get everything back together, make sure to grease the ball joints with a grease gun so that everything is properly lubricated. That's really all there is to it, to replacing a ball joint. It's the first time I've ever done it, so I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. If you got anything out of the video at all, please consider smashing that like button and consider subscribing. Let me know what else you guys want to see down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day.